Morning, church. Good to be together as we celebrate the promises of God. If you're with us virtually, make sure you get your communion elements because that's coming in a little bit as well. So, our story this morning is going to be in the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke. We're going to pick up at the 5th verse. So I encourage you to get your Bibles open. If you're using an electronic device, I encourage you to use the New International Version, the NIV, simply because that's what I've got, and it's good for us to have the same basic wording. Now, context is important, and so I want to give you a little bit of context in this passage. This is set in Jerusalem, just months from Jesus' birth. And at the time of Jesus, Jerusalem was a city that had, we believe, probably about 25,000 year-round residents. So not a huge city. It ballooned with hundreds of thousands of people at least times a year, required festival days. All of Judea, sort of the Judea region, had a population of around 500,000. So, and it was a couple of hundred miles in distance. So not deeply populated, was not a lot of people, and that's sort of that context. Now, in Jerusalem was the temple. Now, this is the second temple. The first one's been destroyed. The second one has been rebuilt. It's a little bit smaller, but the temple was central to the Jews, and it wasn't simply central to worship. It was central to their identity. So people would come from all over the world, really, the known world. They would come to visit Jerusalem because they were intrigued by the Jews for a number of reasons, but two particular reasons. The first is that the Jews kept a Sabbath. They took a rest day. And there's no other religion in that portion of no other religion that really did that. Now, there might be a work day, there might be a go to the garden day or a market day, but the actual day that was a stop day. And so people had heard it, and they were just to observe it. And then there's the temple, and the thing that was so intriguing to people about the temple, the Parthenon and all these Greek temples, all this, there's other stuff that's out there that's actually bigger. But the Jewish temple had no idols. No idols at all. That intrigued people. And they would actually come to observe and to witness. Now, in this region, 500,000 people, a town of about 25,000, it's estimated that there were 18,000 priests. And those priests were working 2 weeks out of the year. 2 one-week deployments over the course of the year. It's a job that every pastor wants to have, to be able just to work two weeks out of the year. We kind of do that, Valina, like it's just Christmas and Easter and everything else is. So they would come and they would work 2 weeks out of the year. And there's a big number of them, right? So you just divide that out into the 18,000. It's a large number of priests that would be there. And the priests would mill around with the people. They would sacrifice if there was a sacrificial service. They would do a variety of different things, help people lead prayers. But there were one thing that was absolutely central to the priesthood that happened only once in a priest's life, is they were drawn by lot, literally a lottery. And if you had never served and done this before, you qualified to be in the lottery. And in the morning and the evening of one of those 14 days that you served as a priest over the year, you would be given the privilege of being able to go in with the incense into the inner sanctum of the temple. And that's where it was believed, behind a curtain, the Holy of Holies, where God resided. And so you were literally given the opportunity to be within an arm's length of where you believed God lived. Huge challenge, huge opportunity, huge thing. So holy was this that only one could go in. And if something happened to that one in there, there was no plan to be able to get them out. So what we believe they actually did was they tied a rope around the priest. So the priest was selected by lottery. It was his time to go. They'd tie a rope around him. He would go in and he would light the incense and right next to the Holy of Holies. And if something happened, he passed out, in awe, whatever it was, they'd pull him out with the rope. That's the context for the story today. This is a man named Zechariah who's a priest. He is there for one of his 2 weeks out of the year. He is there and drawn by lot as an old man finally to be able to go in and to be an arm's length from the very presence of his God. That's the story that we're going to read. We're going to begin at the 5th verse of Luke chapter 1. Listen for the word of the Lord. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless, because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once when Zechariah's division was on duty, and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Don't be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." And Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man. My wife is well in years." The angel said to him, "I'm Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not be able to speak until the day this happens, because you didn't believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When they came out, he couldn't speak to them. They realized he'd had a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but he remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In those days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." That's the word of the Lord. So there's a writer I really, really like, Michael Easter, not a Christian writer. He's kind of made his name in being a journalist for extreme outdoor sports. And he's got a book that I've recommended to a number of you called The Comfort Crisis. And in it, he has a little thing where he talks about the idea, what if you could get rid of all the unneeded stuff in your life in one afternoon? Like, anybody got stuff? Like, yeah, we all got stuff, right? So what if you could get rid of it in one afternoon? And what he does is he sets the stage for a deeper conversation, because he says the real challenge in this is in how we see things. We can see things as stuff, or we can see our possessions as gear. Now, the stuff is the stuff that clutters. And ultimately, it kind of deprives us of life, because it ultimately kind of gets in the way of us. It's just that stuff. But gear has a purpose. Gear has really more than a purpose. Gear has an expectation. There's something that we know we can do, we're going to do with it. And gear is life-giving. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. It strikes me that way. Like my gear, like my backpack and stuff, I know where it is. It's all organized. Every piece of it has a purpose. There's nothing in there that's redundant. It's just like, well, what would it be if we lived our life that way? If we saw everything that was a possession and we made a decision, is this stuff, the clutter, the life-depriving, or is this gear, the stuff that that brings an expectation with it, that something is going to happen that's really life-giving. And that little shift can make all the difference in so many ways of our lives. Now, the truth is, the stuff that really clutters your life is not so much this. I can't tell you how many times someone will come in to meet with me and they will say to me, Jim, I've got a lot of stuff in my past. And whenever that happens, I know that we're going to have a long conversation or series of conversations. I got a lot of stuff in my past. The things that clutter my mind and my spirit. The things that truly, really deprive me of having the life that I could have because I'm... What if you saw those things in your past? The good and really the challenging pieces you might even call bad. What if you saw that as gear? Stuff that, well, not stuff, gear that you could use to make your life better, that you could learn from to shape a new future. What if we even looked at our experiences? I got a lot of stuff in my past, and we turned it in a way where there was something of great value and expectation for us. Now, I bring all of this up because this is the story of Zechariah. Now, it's a story of a man, and it's a true story. But it's also a story of an archetype. And Zechariah, I think, really represents all of the faith at the time. He represents the Jews at the time who've been under oppression, who've got a lot of stuff in their past, a lot of bad things that they've done, a lot of bad things that have been done to them, all this kind of stuff. And so when the story is told, we read it on that level, right? We read it as Zechariah, a true story about what happens and how John the Baptist is to be born and all. We also read it as a story about the people and ultimately a story about us. And so Zechariah has this rope tied around him, most likely. Gear. It's needed. Something happens to him there. He passes out. There's no alternative. It's just the way it's supposed to be. They pull him out. He gets called by Lot. This is his one time in his entire life. He's been thinking about this his entire life as a priest. You know he has. It's like, whoa, will I get picked? And you only get picked once. You're not in the lottery anymore. All the stuff that he's been thinking about and preparing for. All of the stuff that would be gear in his life. So when that moment comes to be an arm's length away from the presence of his God, whoa. But you see what happens? Is that rope and all that preparation? It ultimately has become not gear, but it's become stuff in his life. It's clutter. And it's been life depriving. The very first thing he's struck with fear. And it's not a fear, the word that's being used here is not a fear like whoa, like awe, but like oh. And the very first words that are spoken in the Gospel of Luke is, do not be afraid. And then he goes on, and the angel tells him what's going to happen. And then he says, well, how do I really know this? How can I be sure of this? And then the angel says, well, I'm Gabriel. You know, there are only 3 angels that are named in all the Bible. Gabriel, Michael. You know the third one? The devil. They're the only 3 angels that are given a name. And Gabriel shows up in the book of Daniel. So when he says to Zechariah, his name is Gabriel, it's like, oh, Zechariah, it's like, gosh. He doesn't get it. Zechariah misses the point. All the stuff that should have been gear now is just stuff, and he's not ready for it. He thinks he's ready. He's done all the prayers, he's thought about it, he's waited his whole life to get in there, but all of that's become rote in a sense. And he misses seeing what's really happening. And you and I are guilty almost continually of the same thing. We miss so much of what God has for us. Beauty and love and truth. The truth is, the world is miracle. I mean, that first deep breath of cold air when you stepped out this morning, wow. What a miracle. The world is miracle. Everything that's in it, the way it works, it's miracle. Go out for a walk in a park with a 2-year-old. And you know what will happen? This time of year, they will be in those leaves. And they roll around in them, and they'll hide underneath them, and they'll pick up a leaf and look at it, and they'll pick up another leaf and look at it, and you'll be like, holy moly, come on, let's hurry up, come on, that's a leaf. It's just a leaf. It's not even it's a dead leaf. But everything for a 2-year-old. Do you know what they are? A 2-year-old wakes up in the morning and says, here I am. What are you going to do for me? Everything's a miracle for them. It is. It's an experience of something that's new and bright, and their whole life is an expectation. They wake up with that expectation. And that's not because they're dumb. That's not because they're not fully developed. It's because their life is expectation. And it can stay that way. We have the same leaves. We have the same opportunities, the same things. A first kiss can remain. You remember the first kiss? Whoa. Julianne Ferris, 3rd grade, in a stairwell. On the 14th of February, I would give you the year, but I'm not going to give you that one. And I had a Valentine card for her, and she was upstairs. I was going up, and I threw the card at her, and it fell, and she reached down to pick it up, and when she picked it up, her cheek just kind of brushed mine. Oh man, I feel it now. Are we together? I started not to tell that story, Cheryl's here, but I didn't meet Cheryl until the 9th grade. And I remember a first kiss can be a first kiss every time. If you let it. This is the beauty of the world. This is the love. This is the truth. So how do we do it, right? Jim, that's good preaching, but tell me how to do it. Well, let's see what happens next in the story, because I think there's something happening here. You know what happens next in the story? Gabriel says, okay, you didn't believe me. You didn't get it, so you're not going to be able to talk. Shuts his mouth. And you know why he shuts his mouth? I don't think he shuts his mouth as a punishment. I don't really think that's really the heart of it in the story. I think he shuts his mouth because God gives Zechariah something to do. He doesn't want Zechariah just to come out and start talking about what he saw, what he experienced. He doesn't want him just to come out and start thinking about it. He gives him something to do. He says, you're going to have this child. So Zechariah goes back home to an old woman. He's got to woo her. Are we together? They're going to have a child. Something's got to happen before the child's born. He's got to go back and do some work. And then when he's going to have this baby, he's going to have to name him. Name him John. Now this is what's so weird about the story, is that it never occurs to anyone at the time of Jesus in this period of time, for any Jew, their names were predetermined. Their names came from their father. They're predetermined. It defined what family you were in, who you belonged to, what it is. And it says, you're going to call him John. There's no John in their family. And John literally means graced by God. He gives Zechariah something to do. Now, if you notice this in the gospel, Jesus does the same thing. Almost always when Jesus encounters someone, he listens, but he gives them something to do. The Bible says, he looked at him and loved him and said, go sell your possessions, give them to the poor and come follow me. Go show yourself to the priests. Even in the passages where he doesn't really say to do something, you see it. Howard Thurman in Jesus and the Disinherited says this about the woman at the well with Jesus. He says that as Jesus is with her, what he does actually is he places a crown over her head. And the rest of her life, she seeks to grow tall enough to wear it. And Jesus gives us something to do. What Jesus doesn't want from us, what God doesn't want from us, is for us just to say it or even to think it. He wants us to do something. Daniel Kahneman, an Israeli, he died this year, an Israeli psychologist, won a Nobel Prize for economics. Like, that's wicked smart, right? A psychologist wins a Nobel Prize for economics. And one of the things that Kahneman said over and over and over, it's not until you do it that the clutter clears. You can say something, you can believe something, you can think something. But it's not until you put hand or foot to it that it actually becomes. And this is so true for us. So there's a story I've told you like 5 times in the last year, and I'm going to tell you again. Because this story, if you carry this story with you for a year, I promise you it can change your life. It will change your life. Remember the story, Iris Murdoch and the Sovereignty of Good. Brilliant philosopher, novelist, Brit in the 20th century. She tells a story about a woman who has a daughter-in-law. And she's kind to her daughter-in-law. She's a Brit, she's polite. She's polite to her daughter-in-law, all of that. Nobody would think that she was anything but polite to her. But she just doesn't like her. So underneath the politeness, she just doesn't like her. And the time goes on that she realizes that it's starting to eat her away. And so she makes a decision. She says, I am going to, whether I like her or not, I'm going to act as if I like her. And I'm not just going to be Brit polite. I'm going to actually act like I like her in ways that I'm not required to by my culture. I'm going to like her. And so she starts behaving differently around her. She starts complimenting her in different ways. She starts helping her in different ways. And she starts doing all these things. And here's the thing that happens. It's like this miracle. Is what happens is she, the mother-in-law, actually starts to change her mind. Her mind changes because of what she's doing. And that disdain that she had for her daughter-in-law starts to gently and subtly and slowly but completely change into a like and an affection and a love. And the great miracle is not just that she's changed, but her daughter-in-law changes. Her daughter-in-law starts to live into that compliment, those affirmations, that life. This is absolutely true for you in your life. You can say something, you can even think something, or say you believe it. But when you do it, when you act on it, everything changes. This is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So for you, for me, a rope tied around us. Is it stuff? Is it clutter? Is it all the stuff I got in my past? Is it the things that are cluttering my life and are actually depriving me of the life that I could have? Or is it gear? Is there an expectation? Is there some promise that I'm going to claim and I'm going to act upon and do? Because the world is miracle. It's one of the great things I love about C.S. Lewis in the Narnia Chronicles. He sets it in England, and we're in the middle of World War II, and the bombing, and the kids are having to be taken out, and they're sent to people that are maybe family, maybe not, and all that, and the horrific things. And yet he tells the story of what's there, even in a wardrobe, a cabinet of what's really there. The beauty and the love and the truth. Every kiss can be the first kiss. The life is filled with the glory of God. All this stuff. And even the challenges of our lives, if we take them and we use them, not just store them, but use them. Jesus has placed a crown over you. And he's given you the amazing privilege to spend your life growing tall enough to wear it. This is the story of Zechariah. This is our story. Let us claim it. The world is miracle. Go out and for one moment today, just one, be a 2-year-old kid. Pick up a leaf. See something as if you've never seen it. And move toward it and hold it. And everything in your faith will be shaped. This is the Amen.